It is time to build a workflow from scratch. But first, let us go to Workflows. Open the Getting Started folder and open workflow number 1, the one we used in a previous chapter. What I want to do now is give you an analogy so you can understand what is happening here with all these nodes connected, so it makes more sense. I will use a note node and add some info next to each node. You do not have to do that. Just watch and pay attention. I will open the same workflow, but with those notes added next to each node, and I will explain each one in detail. You probably noticed by now that when we generate images with AI, we usually download a file called a model. Sometimes people call it a model, and sometimes they call it a checkpoint. In practice, they usually mean the same thing. A model is the trained AI itself. It contains everything the AI learned during training, like styles, shapes, and how images are formed. The word checkpoint comes from machine learning. During training, the model is saved at different points in time, called checkpoints. Those checkpoints are what we download and use. So when you hear model or checkpoint, you can think of them as the same thing, the trained AI file that does the image generation. In Comfy UI, you will often see the term load checkpoint, but what you are really doing is loading the model you want to use. We can think of the model as the photographer we want to hire. The load checkpoint node is the step where we actually hire that photographer. Depending on what the photographer learned during training, they will be good at different types of photos. That is why there are so many different models available. Just like in real life, some photographers specialize in portraits, others in landscapes, macro photography, or food photography. AI models work in a very similar way. The better and more complex the training of a photographer, the more expensive they usually are. In our case, that cost is not money, but computer power. Larger and more advanced models usually need more VRAM and a stronger graphics card to run properly. To keep things simple, for now, we are hiring one photographer. We will use a model called Juggernaut Reborn, and this is the photographer that will generate our images. So now that we hired the photographer, what comes next? We need to give instructions to that photographer about what we want to get and what we want to avoid. These instructions are called prompts. We usually use a positive prompt to describe what we want to see in the image and a negative prompt to describe what we want to avoid. In Comfy UI, we use the same node for both. I just colored one green for the positive prompt and one red for the negative prompt so they are easier to recognize. The node we use is called Clip Text Encode. This node takes our written text and translates it into a form that the model can understand. In simple terms, Clip Text Encode acts like a translator between human language and the AI. It turns words into instructions that the photographer can follow during the photo shoot. Besides giving instructions on how the photo should look, we also need to decide how big the photo will be. For that, we use the Empty Latent Image node. This node is like choosing an empty photo paper before taking the photo. Here is where we decide the width and height of the image. We are defining the size of the photo before it even exists. At this stage, there is still no image. It is just an empty space where the photo will be created. Once the photo shoot happens, the final image will always respect the size we set here. Now it is time for the photo shoot. The K-Sampler node is the photo shoot itself. This is where the photographer follows the instructions from the prompts and uses the empty photo paper to take the photo. Each different seed is like taking a new photo of the same scene. The idea is the same, but the result is slightly different every time. The K-Sampler controls how the image is generated. It decides how many steps the photographer takes, how much randomness is allowed, and how closely the final photo follows the instructions. You do not need to understand every parameter right now. What matters is that the K-Sampler is the core of the workflow, where the actual image creation happens. Everything before the K-Sampler prepares the photo shoot. Everything after it finishes the photo. After the photo shoot, the image is created, but it is not visible yet. That is because the K-Sampler does not produce a normal image. It produces something called a latent, which you can think of as a hidden version of the photo. It contains the information of the image, but it is not in a format we can actually view. This is where VAE Decode comes in. The VAE Decode node is like the darkroom in photography. The photo already exists, but it still needs to be developed to become visible. So the VAE decode takes that latent result and converts it into a real image that we can see, preview, and save. Without this node, the workflow can still generate something, but you would not be able to view the final photo because it is still in that hidden latent form. And finally, the Save Image node is where the finished photo is delivered to the client. After the VAE decode step, we usually add a node that either previews or saves the image. Preview nodes let us see the result inside Comfy UI, while the Save Image node writes the final image to disk. Without one of these output nodes, the workflow has no final result. In our Photo Studio analogy, this is the moment where the developed photo is either shown to the client or delivered as the final file. Now let us zoom out and look at the entire process. First, we load a model from our disk. This is like hiring a photographer. Then we give instructions. The positive prompt describes what we want, for example, a close-up portrait of a pet. The negative prompt describes what we want to avoid, for example, saying we do not want dogs. Next, we decide how big the photo should be using the empty latent image node. This is where we choose the size of the photo before it is taken. Now let us run the workflow. You can see that all these instructions are passed into the K-sampler, where the image is actually created. The K-sampler is the photo shoot. It uses steps and different settings, similar to camera settings like shutter speed or aperture, to decide how the photo is taken. After that, the image goes through VAE decode, where it is converted from latent space into actual pixels. This is like developing the photo in a dark room. And finally, we save the image. This is when the photographer delivers the finished photo to the client. Every image generation workflow in Comfy UI follows this same basic idea, even when it becomes more complex. Let us do some quick experiments. What happens if I change the negative prompt, the instructions where we say what we want to avoid? For example, if I say I do not want a cat, it will probably give me another pet that is not a cat, and we might get a dog instead. If we run it again, it is like taking another photo of a pet, because the seed is random. Now we can change the seed to be fixed. When the seed is fixed, each time we use the same prompt, the same settings, and the same seed, we should get the exact same image. If I try to run it again, you can see that nothing happens. The result would be the same, so Comfy UI does not even bother to generate it again. If we change a setting, like the seed, then it lets us generate again, and we get a different image. If we go back to the previous seed, we are back to the same image we had before, generated with that seed. Now that we kind of understand how it works, let us click on this plus sign and build the same workflow from scratch. Double-click on the canvas and search for Load. Usually it is either Load Checkpoint or Load Diffusion Model, but in some cases there are special loaders for specific models. Now that we have the node, we select the model. Since we did not download more models yet, we only have one, Juggernaut Reborn. So we hired our photographer. Now let us give it instructions. Search for prompt, and we can find this Clip Text Encode node. Let us move it next to the other node. I like to change the color to green for the positive prompt. Right-click and clone the node, or just hold Alt and drag the node to make a copy. For this second one, let us change the color to red. Again, this does not influence how it works. It is the same node. It is just visual. For the positive prompt, I will add Close-up portrait of a pet. For the negative prompt, I will add cat. Not all models use negative prompts. Some older models like this one still use it, but you will see later that some newer models are smarter and do not need a negative prompt, and they work better when the negative prompt is disabled. Can you guess how these are connected? We have clip on both input and output, so we can only connect clip to clip. If we try to drag from the model, you can see it does not work, and the same if we try from the VAE. So let us connect the clip output from the model to both of the text encoders. Now we have the instructions for how the image should look, but we still need to define the size. Let us search again using the word empty and add the empty latent image node. There is also a newer one that we will use later for newer models, but for this workflow, we will use this simple one. I like to change the color of this node to purple, but you can leave it as it is if you want. Now we have width and height. Because we work with computers, most models work better with values that are multiples of 64 or 8. That is why we see values like 512 instead of 500. I know that this model was trained with square images at 512 by 512 pixels, so I use these values to get better results. Some newer models are trained with larger images and can generate bigger images, but that comes at a cost. Just like printing a big photo costs more than a small one, a bigger image takes more time to generate, and sometimes your PC cannot handle it. More about that later. Now let us add the most important part, where the magic happens, the K-sampler. As you can see, this node has 4 inputs, where it takes all the instructions and 1 output. First, we connect the model, since it has the same color and name. Then we connect the conditions. The instructions are yellow. Even if the names are different, we connect the positive output to positive and the negative output to negative. That is how it knows which one is positive and which one is negative, even though they come from the same type of node. The last input is the empty latent image, which defines the size of the image we want. Now we have everything needed to generate the image, but it is still in latent format. We need pixels to actually see it. So let us drag a link from the output, and you can see that it suggests VAE decode. We select it, and now the image is decoded, like a darkroom where the photo is developed. Here we also have a VAE input. In this case, the VAE model is included inside the main model, which is why we can connect it directly. In some cases, the VAE comes as a separate file, and then we use a load VAE node. You will see that later. Now, the last step is to save the image, so we add the Save Image node. Let us run the workflow and see if it works, or if we forgot something. If everything turns green, it worked without errors. There are cases where the image does not look right even if there are no errors. That usually means some settings are not ideal. People who create AI models usually provide recommended settings, especially for the K-sampler. Just like in photography, macro and landscape use different camera settings, the same idea applies here. If we look at the previous workflow, we can see recommended settings for this model: Steps 35, CFG 7, this sampler, and this scheduler. So let us change Steps to 35, CFG to 7. For sampler, we use DPM++2M, and for scheduler, we use Keras. Now let us run it again. For this seed, we get some small deformations, but for next seed, it looks fine. We will see later how to improve the results even more. Let me show you what happens when we try to generate an image that is much bigger than what the model was trained to handle. For this example, I will double the image size. On the first try, I did not even get a pet. Sometimes you might get something that looks okay, but most of the time you will see problems. You can get strange deformations, things that do not make sense, or visible mutations. If I increase the size even more, these problems become even more obvious. It also takes more processing power and more time to generate the image. The reason this happens is because this model was trained mainly on 512 by 512 pixel images. When we ask it to generate a much larger image, it struggles to understand the full space. You can think of it like the model trying to generate the image in parts. One part might look okay, but then it tries to continue the image next to it, almost like stitching pieces together, and that is where things break. That is why you sometimes see double heads, repeated objects, or strange structures in large images. Bigger images are not always better if the model was not trained for that size. But if a model is trained to handle larger images, you can get more details and better results. Let us say I add ugly to the negative prompt, so we push the result toward more beautiful images. For the positive prompt, let us be more specific. We want a dog, and we want it to be beautiful. Now when we run it, we get a more beautiful dog. Because this model is really old, like I told you, it is good for practice. But today we have much bigger and more accurate models. They produce better results with fewer deformations, but they are larger and need more VRAM to run properly. Our desktop computers are very similar to Comfy UI because they are both built around the idea of connecting specialized components together, where each one does a specific job. The CPU acts like the central processor, just like the sampler or the model does the main work in Comfy UI. The monitor is like preview and output nodes that show results. The keyboard and mouse are inputs, just like prompts and parameters. Printers and speakers are output devices, like save image or audio nodes. Routers handle communication, similar to data links between nodes. The reason we design systems this way is because breaking complex tasks into smaller, connected parts makes them easier to understand, easier to control, easier to upgrade, and more flexible. That is exactly why Comfy UI uses nodes instead of hiding everything behind a single button. Now that we know how to create a workflow, we also need to learn how to save it. If you look at the top, you can see it says Unsaved Workflow. That means none of these settings or nodes are stored yet. If you want to reuse the same workflow later, without recreating everything from scratch, you need to save it. If I click on this arrow next to the workflow name, you can see there are several save options. Personally, I prefer using the main menu. So I go to File, and here we have Save, Save As, and Export. When you click Save and the workflow has never been saved before, Comfy UI will ask you to give it a name and choose where to save it. If the workflow was already saved and you just made changes, clicking Save will overwrite the existing file with the same name. Save As lets you save the same workflow under a different name. This is the option I use the most, especially when I want to create variations of a workflow. Export is very useful because it is not limited to the Comfy UI workflow folder. It allows you to save the workflow anywhere on your computer, even outside the Comfy UI folder. The API option is mainly used when working with online or cloud-based workflows, so we will not use it here. So let us click Export. Now it asks for a name. Choose a name that makes sense to you. Click Confirm, then choose where to save it. For example, I can save it on my desktop. You can see that the file is saved with the .json extension. This JSON file contains all the nodes, connections, and settings of your workflow. This file is your workflow, and you can open it anytime, share it with others, or modify it later. JSON files are simple text files. You can open them with any text editor, like Notepad. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it is just a structured way of writing text so both humans and computers can read it. In Comfy UI, the JSON file stores things like node types, connections, parameters, and settings, all written as text. That is why workflow files are small in size and easy to share. They do not include images or models, only instructions. If we go to Workflows, you can see I have that folder with workflows saved there. You can do that too. Go to the menu, go to File, choose Save As, give it a name, and confirm. Now if we go to Workflows, we can see the workflow is saved there. Right now it is not organized into any folder, it is just in the main list, but you can add a folder name in front of the workflow name when you save it. For example, folder name, then a /, then the workflow name. Let us see where it is saved. Go to your Comfy UI folder, then inside the Comfy UI folder, go to User, then Default, then Workflows. Here you can see your saved workflow and also the folder I created for this course that comes with the Easy Installer. You can create your own folder manually. For example, I can create a folder called My Workflows, then drag that workflow into it. Now if we go back to Comfy UI, nothing changes immediately because Comfy UI usually reads this when it starts, but we can refresh using this refresh button. Now our folder appears there, and we can see the workflow inside it. I suggest organizing your workflows like this because over time you will have a lot of workflows and it becomes hard to keep track of everything. By the way, you can also use this search bar to search for a workflow by name. We also have a bookmark icon. If we click it, the workflow is added to the bookmarks at the top, so the ones you use the most stay there. If you click the bookmark again, it is removed from the favorites list. Let us collapse this and I will show you one more thing. If we go to the desktop and open the shortcut for the output folder, or if we go directly to the output folder, you can see all the images generated so far with Comfy UI. The last one is this dog. You probably did not think about this yet, but if you open an image generated with Comfy UI in Notepad, you can actually see some code at the beginning. Just like with workflows, this happens because Comfy UI attaches the workflow to the image when it saves it. After that, there is the image data, which we cannot really read. This means that every image has the full workflow embedded in it, including all the settings and prompts. Let me drag this image onto the Comfy UI canvas so you can see what happens. Now you can see that it loads as a workflow with the file name. If we generate again, we get exactly the same image, because it uses the same seed and settings. Let us go back to the output folder and drag a different image, for example this robot. Now it loads that workflow, and if we run it, we get the exact same robot. This is very useful. Another thing you might notice is that all images start with the word Comfy UI, followed by a number. This happens because in the Save Image node, the prefix is set to that value. We can change it. For example, I can set it to Pixa, and now when I run the workflow, the image file name will start with that word, followed by a number, as you can see here. If you hover over the prefix field, you can get more information about how to format it. You can include things like the date and other values in the file name. Now let us change it again. I will add a folder name, for example my images, then a /, then the image prefix. When we run the workflow now, the images will be saved inside that folder. Let us go to the output folder. You can see we now have a folder called My Images, and inside it we have the images that start with the prefix we set, followed by a number. Now I will go back to the Workflows folder that we created earlier and delete it. Back in Comfy UI, if we refresh the Workflows list, you can see that the folder is gone. We are left only with the Getting Started folder we used for this episode. When you create your own folders and organize your workflows, I suggest naming them in a way that makes sense. You can name them by base model, like SDXL workflows or Flux workflows, or by function, like text-to-image workflows, in-painting workflows, or video workflows. Choose whatever makes the most sense to you, but organizing your workflows early will save you a lot of time later. In this chapter, I want to show you how Comfy UI is organized on your disk. This is important because sooner or later you will need to know where to place models, images, workflows, and custom nodes. Do not worry if this looks overwhelming at first. You do not need to understand everything right now. I will focus only on the folders you actually need as a user. This is the main Comfy UI Easy Install folder. Think of this as the main workspace that contains everything Comfy UI needs to run. The most important things here are the Comfy UI folder, the Python embedded folder, the add-ons folder, and the batch files used to start or update Comfy UI. In normal usage, you will mostly work inside the Comfy UI folder. If you have a different version of Comfy UI, you will not have the add-ons folder, and some of the bat files will be named differently, but pretty much everything else should be similar. When we open the Comfy UI folder, we see many files and folders. Most of these are internal files used by Comfy UI itself. As a beginner, you do not need to touch most of these. The important folders for us are models, input, output, custom nodes, and the user folder. The models folder is where all AI models live. This includes checkpoints, LoRa files, VAEs, control nets, upscalers, and more. Inside the models folder, everything is organized by type. For example, checkpoints or diffusion models for main image generation models, LoRa's for LoRa files, VAE for VAE files, ControlNet for ControlNet models. When a workflow tells you to download a model, it will also tell you exactly which subfolder to place it in. If a model is not placed in the correct folder, Comfy UI will not see it. The input folder is where you place images that you want to load into Comfy UI. For example, images used for image-to-image, ControlNet, masks, or reference images. Any image you place here will be visible inside Comfy UI when using a load image node. The output folder is where Comfy UI saves generated images by default. Every time you use a Save Image node, the result will appear here. This makes it very easy to find all your generated images in one place. The Custom Nodes folder is where all custom nodes are installed. These are extra features added by the community. Each folder here represents a custom node package. For example, we already used the RG3 node, and we will use more later. When you install nodes using the manager, they usually end up here automatically. If a custom node is missing or broken, this is usually the first folder you should check. Inside the user folder, we have user-specific data. The most important part for us is the workflows folder. This is where Comfy UI stores workflows that you save from inside the interface. These workflow files are saved as JSON files. The add-ons folder is specific to the Easy Install version. It contains extra tools, optimizations, and helper scripts. You usually do not need to touch this folder unless a tutorial specifically mentions it. You do not need to memorize this right now, but this structure might change as new tools are created by Ivo. For example, this bat file lets you link a folder with models from another Comfy UI installation. This one installs the Nunchaku node, and this one installs Sage Attention. There are also different TorchPack versions for more advanced users who need a specific version for certain custom nodes. You will also find extra tools, like one for Windows 10 that enables long paths so Comfy UI can download models even if the path is very long. There is also an update folder with bat files, but as you will see later, for the easy install version, I recommend using different update bat files. The Python embedded folder includes a self-contained Python installation. This helps avoid conflicts with other software and makes Comfy UI easier to run and update. As you use Comfy UI more, this folder structure will start to make sense naturally. In the next chapters, I will always tell you exactly where things need to go. Let us talk a little bit about updates and custom nodes. What you are seeing here is the Comfy UI Easy Install folder. This setup already includes everything needed to update Comfy UI safely. The most important rule is this: always close Comfy UI before updating. Never update while it is running in the browser. Start Comfy UI BAT. This only launches Comfy UI. It does not update anything. Update Comfy UI BAT. This updates the core Comfy UI code. Use this when you want the latest features or fixes. Update Comfy UI and Nodes BAT. This updates Comfy UI and all installed custom nodes. Update Easy Install.bat. This updates the Easy Install system itself. When should you update? Update when something is broken. Update when a node requires a newer version. Update when you want new features. Do not update right before an important project. Updates can sometimes break workflows. If something breaks after an update, you can usually fix it by updating again or removing the last custom node you installed. One important reminder: Comfy UI moves fast. Stability comes from not updating every single day. If everything works, it is okay to stay on your current version. At some point, you will mess up Comfy UI. Maybe a node breaks, or some dependencies get messed up, or an update has bugs. But remember, you can always do a fresh install when that happens. Just create a new folder and reinstall using the Easy Installer. Let us double-click on Update Easy Install. This updates only the Easy Installer and adds extra tools and add-ons. As we move forward in this series, more models will appear, new nodes will be added, and Ivo likes to create scripts that make these installations easier. When you see that the installation is complete, you can read more about the new release using this link, or press any key to exit. You may not see any changes immediately, but if we go to the add-ons folder, you can see that we now have more bat files than we had in the first chapter. Now let us go back to the main folder and try to update Comfy UI to see if everything still works or if we break some nodes. Nodes sometimes break after an update because Comfy UI itself changes how things work internally. Many custom nodes are made by independent developers, not by the Comfy UI team. These custom nodes often rely on specific Comfy UI behavior, internal APIs, or extra Python libraries and dependencies. When Comfy UI updates, those assumptions can change, and the node stops working until its creator updates it to match the new version. So Comfy UI started after the update, but let us open the command window to see if everything worked correctly. Usually, after startup, you can see import times for custom nodes. As you saw before, all custom nodes are inside the custom nodes folder. But look what happened here. After the update, one of the custom nodes installed, like Tcache, failed to import. That means if you have a workflow that uses that node, it will not work. If you do not use that node, you can ignore it and try updating Comfy UI again in a few days to see if it gets fixed. I will close Comfy UI now and try something else. Sometimes there are newer versions of the custom nodes, and if the author fixed the issue, updating the nodes can fix the problem. So this bat file updates only Comfy UI, and this one updates both Comfy UI and the custom nodes. This process can take a while because it updates all the nodes, so I will speed it up. Comfy UI started, so let us check the command window to see if the issue was fixed. The node was still not fixed. This means that at the time I recorded this video, the update from that day broke that node. When you watch this video, it might already be fixed and work for you. Either because Comfy UI fixed a bug, the node creator patched the node, or a new developer created a replacement node. There is one more thing I want to try. We can go back to an older version of Comfy UI that did work, a version that had the right conditions for that node. The downside is that if Comfy UI released new features or nodes for newer models, those might not work on the older version, so it is always a compromise. You have to choose between keeping a specific custom node working or using the latest Comfy UI updates. Ivo hid this option so beginners do not accidentally mess up their Comfy UI. Let us go to the Add-ons folder, then to Tools, and here we have the version switcher. When we run this bat file, Comfy UI is downgraded to a previous version. In my case, it went from version 0.7 back to version 0.6. If you run this script again, it upgrades Comfy UI back to the latest master branch. Let us press any key to close this. Now that we are on an older version, it is time to check if that node works. Let us start Comfy UI, wait for the interface to load, then open the command window and check the custom nodes. Now it is fixed and there are no errors with the nodes. In a few days, I will try updating again to see if it gets fixed in the newer version. But this is basically how you update and downgrade Comfy UI using the Easy Installer. Other Comfy UI versions might require you to run commands manually, but I keep pushing Ivo to create bat scripts for these tasks. I want to spend my time generating, not typing lines of code. You will see that we have the manager here. In other versions, you might find it somewhere else in the menu. Let us open the manager and see what we have. Here we also have Update and Update Comfy UI. These are similar to the bat files, but the bat files have something extra. They take into account some dependencies needed for certain custom nodes to work, which Comfy UI itself does not handle when updating. For example, for the Nunchaku node to work, it needs specific dependencies, like a certain version of a library. The bat file updates Comfy UI, but then adjusts or downgrades those dependencies to the versions required by the custom nodes we use. Ivo tries to maintain these bat files and keep them updated so they stay compatible with the versions needed to run the workflows shown in these video tutorials. Because I am using the Easy Installer, I did not touch these update buttons inside the manager. I only used the bat files. If you have a different version of Comfy UI, you will need to use these update options, or use a bat file from the update folder instead. In the manager, you can also find the latest Comfy UI news, such as what was fixed, what is new, and recent changes. At the bottom, you can see the Comfy UI version and the manager version. Most of the time, the manager is used for managing custom nodes. If we go to the Custom Nodes Manager, we can see all the available custom nodes created by different developers. There are a lot of them. I personally try to keep the number of installed nodes to a minimum and install only what is essential or what I use most often. Some people install hundreds of nodes, but the more nodes you install, the harder it becomes to keep everything compatible, because each node can have its own dependencies and requirements. If I filter by installed, you will usually not see many nodes here besides the manager itself. However, I asked Ivo to include a few essential nodes that I use most often. One example is the RG3 custom node, which includes the image comparer node that is very useful for comparing images side by side. Each custom node has a title and a version number. You can switch versions if needed, for example, when an older workflow only works with a specific version of a node. For each node, you also have several actions available. Update only that node, switch the version, temporarily disable it, or uninstall it. You can also see how many individual nodes are included in that custom node package, along with a short description. Some nodes mention possible conflicts with other nodes. If you click on that yellow warning text, you can read more details about those conflicts. These conflicts usually matter only if you use both conflicting nodes in the same workflow. You can also see the author of the node and the number of stars it has on GitHub. Stars are given by users and usually indicate how popular or trusted a project is. Some developers are well known and consistently release high-quality nodes. That said, there have been cases in the past where certain nodes had security issues, so it is still a good idea to be careful. You can also see when the node was last updated. To switch versions, you click the version selector, choose a version from the list, click Select, and then follow the steps shown. We will not do that right now. As you remember, every custom node that gets installed ends up in the Custom Nodes folder. Here you can see all the custom nodes that come with the Easy Install version at the time of this recording. Now let us install one node as a test, just to see how the process works. Open the manager, go to Custom Nodes Manager, and search for a node called Align. We will use this as a test because it does not require special dependencies, so in theory it should not affect Comfy UI too much. Each node entry has a title. If you click on it, it opens the GitHub page for that node. On GitHub, you can see the code, because every custom node is basically Python code and supporting files. You can also check the Issues tab, where users report problems and sometimes solutions are discussed. If you scroll down, you usually find important information like required Comfy UI versions, Python versions, or other dependencies. These are the dependencies I mentioned earlier, things the developer relied on when creating the node. You also see installation instructions either through the manager, which we are doing now, or manually using commands like git clone, which simply copies the code into the custom nodes folder. Before installing any custom node, it is a good habit to read this information. Some nodes require things your system might not have, and then they will not work. Now let us install this node. Click the Install button. You will be asked to choose a version, so select the latest version. The button changes, and installation begins. When it finishes, you will see a Restart button. Comfy UI needs to restart for the node to become available. Click Restart and confirm. Comfy UI shuts down. You will see the browser trying to reconnect while Comfy UI is restarting. After a few moments, you get a confirmation message. Click Confirm. The node is now installed. If you go back to the manager, open Custom Nodes Manager, and search for the Align node, you will see that it now shows an Uninstall button. If installation had failed, you would see an Import Failed message instead. If you look inside the Custom Nodes folder on disk, you will now see a new folder for this node. It is simply the same code you saw on GitHub, copied locally. This code is what adds new nodes to the Comfy UI interface. If you deleted this folder manually, that would also uninstall the node. However, let us uninstall it properly using the manager. Go back to the manager, click Uninstall, and Confirm. Again, you will be asked to restart Comfy UI. Confirm, wait for the restart, and then confirm the browser reload. Now go back to the Custom Nodes Manager and search for the Align node again. You will see the Install button again, which means the node is no longer installed. If you check the Custom Nodes folder, you will also see that the folder for this node has been removed. This is the basic workflow for installing, updating, and uninstalling custom nodes using the manager. Sometimes when you download a workflow from other people on the internet, you will have missing nodes because they used custom nodes that you do not have installed. When you do not know what nodes they used, you can use the Install Missing Custom Nodes button. This will give you a list of missing nodes and the option to install them. That said, I personally prefer to install nodes manually, so I have full control over what gets installed. That is why I usually include a note node in my workflows, explaining exactly which custom nodes are required. Now let us look at templates. If we open templates, we can see different workflows created by the Comfy UI team. If we filter by image generation workflows and select something like a Z-Image Turbo text to image workflow, Comfy UI will first tell us that we have missing models. These are the AI models required for the workflow to generate images. Usually, it tells you exactly which folder the model needs to go into and gives you the model name along with a download link or a download button. In this example, you can see it needs a VAE model and a few other models. Once you download those models and place them in the correct folders, the workflow should work, assuming you have enough VRAM to run it. In this case, there are no missing nodes, so let us close this. Now let us go to Menu, then File, then Open, and open a workflow that I know uses missing custom nodes. You will see a message saying the workflow uses custom nodes that are not installed. At first, you might not see any red nodes on the canvas. That is because this workflow uses subgraphs. Subgraphs are basically nodes that contain other nodes inside them. If you have experience with Photoshop, you can think of them like smart objects. When you see an icon with a square and an arrow, you can click it to enter the subgraph. Once inside, you can see the red node that is missing. If we now open the manager and click Install Missing Custom Nodes, Comfy UI detects that node and offers to install it. For many nodes, this works perfectly. However, some nodes, like Nunchaku, require additional dependencies and extra setup. We will talk about those in a future episode. The important thing to know is that for many workflows, install missing custom nodes can quickly fix the problem. Let us close this for now. If we open the manager again, you will also see a Models Manager. This lets you browse and download models by type. Personally, I rarely use this, because a model without a workflow is not very useful. In my tutorials and on my Discord server, every workflow comes with notes explaining exactly which models you need and where to put them. The Comfy UI templates also clearly list required models and folders. So let us do a quick recap. Use update comfyui.bat to update only Comfy UI. Use update Comfy UI and nodes.bat to update Comfy UI and all custom nodes. Use update easyinstall.bat to update the easy install system and helper scripts. The update folder exists for users with other Comfy UI versions. The add-ons folder only exists in the easy install version. Inside add-ons, the tools folder includes the version switcher, which lets you downgrade or upgrade Comfy UI if needed. This is useful when a new update breaks a node you rely on. Inside the Comfy UI folder, the Custom Nodes folder contains all installed custom nodes. If you delete a folder from here, you uninstall that node. Sometimes, if a node fails to install correctly, deleting its folder and reinstalling can fix the issue. I know this is a lot of information. Do not worry if it does not all stick right away. Practice, experiment, and come back to this tutorial in a month. You will be surprised how many things suddenly make sense that you missed the first time. Regarding the Tcache node, after a few days, Comfy UI was updated again and the problem was still not fixed. There is now version 8, and even if you downgrade to version 7, it is still not fixed. Comfy UI keeps adding updates, and at some point, some custom nodes will stop working. If that node is not important for you, you can delete it or uninstall it. You can also just disable it from the manager, or drag the Tcache folder into the disabled folder so it is disabled. You can move it back out of the disabled folder anytime you want to try it again.